divide the pie for us here. How big are those that are happy this is happening Saturday, and how many are those who sympathize with the Collegian's editorial?
Well, let's just break it down here versus kind of the rest of the country and the world. This has always been my default position, Bob. Here, you still have an enormous percentage of people who don't really think Joe Paterno did anything wrong and will defend him. And then this is very important too, Bob. They want to make sure that he is recognized for all of the tremendous things that he did do for Penn State University, right, or the football program for the state. But then you take a look, obviously, the rest of the country. Anytime one of these stories goes up on a national website, it's, massive criticism. But then, if it goes up on a local or statewide website, you have a lot of support for Joe Paterno. So it's clearly a here versus everywhere else issue.
Exactly. That from late last week here on OTL, that division of opinion on Joe Paterno and the wisdom and the optics of honoring the 50th anniversary of his first Penn State game. That was the question on Saturday at Beaver Stadium. At 3 different points during the Penn State-Temple game, videos were shown on the scoreboard. The first such video sparked applause, with some among the Penn State fans standing to applaud, while a number of fans in the Temple seating section were seen to turn their backs on the field for the duration of the video. That sentiment was echoed in a banner that was hung by Temple fans at the top of the stadium that day. Joe Paterno's son, Jay, who of course had been on his coaching staff, addressed those critics who maintained the late head coach should have done more to address Jerry Sandusky's child abuse dating back to at least the 1990s.
In a statement that he made, he said, with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I had done more. I think what he's saying is, not what he's saying, I know what he was saying because he was still alive when he said it. He said, Jay, this society, I grew up in it, we weren't aware of these types of things. Maybe if I had more awareness about these types of crimes, I could have seen things or done more. And, we all, who doesn't wish they would have done more? Who doesn't wish they could have seen something? But you know what? People have used that to try and vilify him or point the finger at him rather than saying, you know what? This happens in my town. This happens in your town. We all should wish that we could do more for these types of things rather than trying to make that it's some kind of admission of guilt, which it wasn't. It was an admission that this is an issue we all need to be more aware of.
Jay Paterno speaking with our Mark Schwartz. The question of honoring Joe Paterno, given the circumstances of Jerry Sandusky's crimes and who knew what, when, and where, that stirs conversation anywhere in this country, but never more viscerally nor personally than in a column written for The Undefeated yesterday by my colleague Mike Wise. It is under the headline, Penn State Doesn't Get to Decide Joe Pa's Legacy. I know. Mike Wise, welcome. I usually know how to start an interview. I have no idea where to begin with you. Tell me what you want to tell me.
Well, first of all, I didn't expect the support and the love not only from people inside my company but outside that have shown that to me. Well, when I came out as essentially an adult survivor of child sexual abuse, it happened to me from a family member years ago. I kind of threw this at my editors because I was on Twitter the other night before the game, and I saw this big back and forth between people that didn't want to honor him versus Penn State loyalists, and I thought, I can feel a little bit what the Sandusky's victims felt like right now, and I really wanted to portray that as honestly as I could. It was a hard column to write. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life in journalism, but I can say that it would have been harder, knowing what I know, not to write it.
What you know, and you capture it with searing pain and honesty. You write early on in the column about, and I've been to that courthouse in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, not on that particular day. You went the day that Sandusky was going to be sentenced, and you heard the victims. Describe that experience.
Yeah, that was one of those things where I walked in and I was, frankly, I was angry. And when you're sitting 8 yards, 10 yards away from a man that is about to be sentenced for sexually molesting 10 boys at such a young age, and all of a sudden these boys show up as men in a courtroom, and I like that people are saying I have courage. I had a support network. These guys, many of these men, these adult survivors, didn't have anybody, and they got on that stand and they had the courage to put away a man that he would never, so he could never harm another child again. And to hear their rage, to hear their anger, to see them directly address Jerry Sandusky, And in a way, like, it gave me hope that, all the anger, rage I had of the experience I had when I was a child, you didn't have to channel that rage toward violent things. These guys never decided to throw their own life away because of what one man did to them. And it was remarkable. It was remarkable to see them on the stand that day. And to be honest, at that moment, Bob, 4 years I've been thinking about writing it. I just didn't have the guts in me then.
You certainly demonstrated, though, plenty of courage and guts. How many years in your life did it take for you to process what occurred to you with your uncle and then address it even internally within your family?
It took me 20 years to actually send him a letter and tell him that he did something that, while he's part of my family, there are things that family members can do to exclude themselves from my family, and that was one of them. And I told him that he affected me, and I never heard from him on it. I eventually told my aunt. My sister was incredibly supportive, and it was hard because one of the things that bothered me over the weekend was there were some people that believe that to this day that Jerry Sandusky it wasn't responsible, or that Joe Paterno was just thrown under the bus by Penn State and had no concept of people looking the other way. Well, when your family looks the other way, and football families and universities are called, we call them families for a reason. When your family looks the other way, it's incredibly hurtful because you still want to be a part of that family. But when you see pictures of, say, for instance, a couple survivors going to Penn State games and them thinking, well, how badly were they hurt? There's just a disconnect there. That on the outside world, they have no idea the pain you're suffering inside, and you're trying to make it work and trying to coexist in this world where you love other family members, but you don't see them giving you the support or sympathy you need to go through this mental gymnastics of pain, really. And so when I see all those survivors and when I hear their stories, it motivated me 10 times more.
You heard Jay Paterno a few moments ago before we came to you on this program. So, we all wish we knew more. And I think implied in that, and I've spent time with Jay on this program, and we all know the good that his father did for the university, the grand experiment, the donations and whatnot. But if Jay were sitting across from you, what would you say right now?
I would tell him that I get where he's coming from. My father was one of the greatest men in my life, and he was also a very flawed person. I finally realized that I had to admit his flaws and see who he really was and accept them. And I would tell Jay Paterno that even if you discounted all the other things said about him, there's no question that Joe Paterno knew about that 2001 incident involving Jerry Sandusky and a 10-year-old in the Penn State showers, told to him by a graduate assistant coach. And if you think that Joe Paterno did enough by just telling the athletic director, of which he could have got fired any day of the week. He's the most popular man in the state of Pennsylvania, maybe the second most powerful after the governor. If you think he did enough, I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute and think to yourself, he never found out that boy's name. If that boy's name, that 10-year-old, was Jay Paterno, would you have said, Jay, your father did enough?
Right. Mike Wise, who has lived the horror, come out the other side. Michael, thank you for being here. It's a remarkable piece. It's at theundefeated.com. Penn State does not get to decide Joe Pa's legacy, I know. Mike Wise, thank you so much.